So yeah, I found the whole thing to be kind of. I wasn't quite sure what was going on with it. There's a bit of an enigma, you know, a little ambiguity in there, but I was able to figure it out in the end.
Hey, and welcome to a Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing that game. It's just an excuse to talk about records. It's a game I play with my brother, Plastic Eric, from the Plastic Soundwave Cult, and you can follow along and play along by subscribing to both channels. So in Eric's last video, he showed Misfits by Misfits. I don't know that I've ever really heard any of their stuff, but kind of hit around where I would have thought. Sonically, somewhere in the Black Flag realm, thematically, somewhere in the Cramps realm, kind of midway between those two acts, somewhere very garagey punk, heading into that B-movie horror aesthetic that they share with the psychobilly of the Cramps. I can groove to stuff like that. Not necessarily my first go-to, but it's not bad. And thought about the fact that it is a compilation, actually, that album, Misfits, but because it's called Misfits, can be easily mistaken for just a regular studio album. I tried to find anything I might have like that, a collection that people often mistook for a studio album. Didn't find anything that I didn't think people already generally knew, like Louder Than Bombs. I think people generally know that that's a compilation from the Smiths. And I thought about the fact that it opens on the song She, which I could have connected to the Harry Connick Jr. album, She, which also opens with a track called She. But I didn't really want to talk about Harry Connick Jr. And so in doing my research, what I picked up on is that the very earliest singles for Misfits are labeled The Misfits. And that quickly got dropped. And so they are just Misfits. And there's no the in sight once you get past those very early singles. And then they have their logo, that kind of creep show font that they stuck with basically after that point. And I tried to find another band that dropped the. And I came up with a little bit of a tenuous connection. Not necessarily a slam dunk, because in their home country of Australia, they never had a the, but their first album was issued everywhere but Australia with a different cover and a the preceding the band name. And that album was Stone Age Romeos, and the band is Hoodoo Gurus. But I wanted to pick an album that did not have the, so as Misfits had already dropped the, I went with Magnum Cum Laude, which is from 1989. It's a terrific record. The pun of the title, unfortunately, leaves kind of an elephant in the room as far as the words, but it's just a pun on the Latin Magna Cum Laude, which is with great distinction. Phrase you hear around graduations and things. But it contains and opens up with the song Come Anytime, which is my favorite Hoodoo Gurus song. They didn't make a lot of noise outside of Australia, other than sales. I mean, I'm talking about sales-wise. They made a lot of noise with their music. Glorious noise. Very broad power pop. A very sort of drum, bass, and guitar kind of setup, especially early on. Very catchy songs, but they just didn't catch on really anywhere outside of Australia, where they were, even there, sort of minor figures, but they did chart basically from the beginning. The weird outlier is in the US sort of college charts, the alternative charts. Basically read college radio in the 80s. All four of their albums that they released in the 80s, of which this one is the fourth, they all went to number one. And the single, Come Anytime, also went to number one in the US not on the Hot 100, but on the alternative, again, college radio sort of charts. And they never even had a #1 of any sort in Australia, even though they scored basically everything that they released on the charts somewhere in Australia. This album, Magnum Cum Laude, has only been reissued. It came out around the world in 1989, but it has only ever been reissued in Australia. And my copy happens to be a 2009 reissue. Got expanded with some bonus tracks and a remaster. I think it's just a straight re-release of the 2005 remaster and one of about 4 re-releases over time that the album has had in Australia. So they got a great sound. Come Anytime is a fantastic single. A lot of people might point out one of the earlier ones, What's My Scene, or I Want You Back, which are also great singles. But my personal favorite, one of my favorite singles of the 80s is Come Anytime from Hoodoo Gurus. And the other singles were Another World and Axe Grinder. They are more sort of par for the course. This was a band, in my opinion, that when they hit, they super hit. But I wouldn't call any of their albums that I'm familiar with, at least top to bottom, amazing. They pretty much hit on, it's not quite single plus filler. They're better than that. There's generally some album tracks that also are keepers. Here, I would say Glamour Puss and I Don't Know Anything are both terrific songs. A lot of fun to listen to they're just plain album tracks, the deep cuts. And very little that offends, but they definitely had an ability to just sort of crank out your average kind of power pop, cranked up a little bit. It's kind of power pop cranked up to 11 kind of thing. So very noisy guitar-y, but also very catchy tunes. But they found a hard time standing out from one another, in my opinion. But still, overall, I went through the trouble of picking up this album, even though I had a collection of Hoodoo Guru singles called Electric Soup. And prior to that, Kinky is the only other album, which is the album that followed this. That was the only album, Hoodoo Guru's album, that we had in our collection from the time that it came out. I forget who bought it, whether it was my wife or me, or if that was an early acquisition once we were together. But that was the only one we bought contemporaneously. And then I picked up the singles collection so I could have Come Anytime, as well as I Want You Back and the stuff when I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to invest in an import, which all these ended up having to be. But in the end, when I saw that there was a remaster, I jumped on that. And so this is the third now Hoodoo Gurus title that I own. And I also realized, so I had my sort of tenuous connection of bands that dropped the, which Hoodoo Gurus didn't really do. It was more like A&R slapped them with the on their first album around the world outside of Australia, and they said, no, we're not a the band. We're just Hoodoo Gurus. But just like last week, where when I did the Untouchables and realized that connecting to the Specials, having already decided to do that, turned out Jerry Dammers of the Specials had produced one of the tracks on the Untouchables album, which I didn't realize. Here, I sort of realized late into the going that both this and Misfits have a skull on the cover. So there's a second, if that feels like a little bit stronger of a connection for you. There you go. It's my secondary connection, but I am going to try and wrap this up. My camera is flashing its battery life at me, so hopefully I can finish this up before we go. I will throw Hoodoo Gurus, Magnum Cum Laude from 1989, great record, over to Eric, and you can look for his response on his channel, The Plastic Soundwave Cult, on Mondays. So yeah, cue that up, give it a listen, especially Come Anytime. It's a great single, super catchy. I love it. And beyond that, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.